Hi, my name is Amelia. I was 34 when I finally understood something I had felt my whole life but never had words for. I wasn't unlucky. I wasn't forgettable. I wasn't too sensitive. I was just convenient. That realization didn't come during a fight or a breakdown. It came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, in my parents' living room, while everyone else was talking over each other, and I was nodding like I always did. Yeah. That sounds right. I remember folding my hands in my lap, thumbs rubbing together without me noticing. The ceiling fan was ticking slightly off rhythm. My mother kept checking her phone. My younger brother, Ethan, was talking about his new job like it was the center of the universe. No one asked how I was doing. And that's when it clicked. Growing up, I learned early how to stay small. Not invisible. Just manageable. I'm the oldest. Lena Harper. Born in Ohio. Middle class. Suburban house that always smelled faintly of coffee and laundry detergent. My parents weren't cruel people. That's important to say. They fed us. Paid the bills. Showed up to school events. But love in our house was uneven. Ethan came 6 years after me. He was loud. Emotional. Needed help with everything. I was the opposite. Quiet. Capable. Easy. Lena's fine, my mom used to say when teachers asked questions. She doesn't need much. And I believed that was a compliment. By the time I was 12, I knew how to cook dinner. By 14, I did my own laundry. By 16, I stopped asking for rides. Not because no one would give them, but because it felt easier not to need. I watched how attention worked in our house. You didn't get it by being steady. You got it by needing something. And I didn't want to be a burden. So I learned to listen. High school passed like that. I did well. Not perfect, just good enough to not cause concern. When college came up, the conversations were brief. Ethan was still in middle school then. Struggling. Acting out. My parents were exhausted. So when I said, I'll figure it out, they let me. No long talks. No campus tours together. No sit-down planning sessions. I filled out applications at night, at the kitchen table, while my mom watched TV in the other room. Sometimes she'd ask, without looking up. You doing homework? Yeah, I'd say. And that was that. I got into a state university 3 hours away. Partial scholarship. Loans for the rest. I told them over dinner. My dad nodded. My mom said, that's good, honey. Ethan asked if he could have more potatoes. No one asked how I felt. I went to my room afterward and sat on the bed for a long time, staring at nothing. I remember feeling something tight in my chest, not sadness exactly. Just quiet. Like something important had happened, and I'd experienced it alone. College was where I became even better at disappearing. I worked 2 part-time jobs. Shared a tiny apartment. Learned how to stretch groceries and energy. I didn't call home much. Not out of anger, just habit. When I did, the calls were short. How's school? Good. How's Ethan? He's stressed. Pause. Well, okay. Love you. Click. I don't think they noticed how rarely I talked about myself. Years later, sitting in that same living room, listening to Ethan talk about his job, the one my dad helped him get, I felt that old familiar pressure in my chest. Only this time, it didn't feel normal. It felt wrong. My mother laughed at something he said. My dad leaned forward, engaged. I sat back, crossed my ankles, and watched. I realized something then. They weren't choosing him over me. They had simply stopped seeing me as someone who needed choosing at all. And for the first time, instead of shrinking around that thought, I stayed with it. I let it hurt. That was the beginning. Not the explosion. Not the confrontation. Just the moment I stopped making excuses for the silence. And quietly asked myself a question I had avoided for decades. What happens if I stop being easy? In my late 20s, people started calling me successful. It happened gradually. A better job. A better apartment. A schedule that looked full from the outside. From the inside, it just felt busy. I moved to Columbus, closer to work. A small one-bedroom on the third floor of a building that always smelled like carpet cleaner. The windows faced a parking lot. Nothing pretty. But it was mine. I told my parents over the phone. "That's great," my mom said. "How's the rent over there?" I told her the number. There was a pause. Then, "Well, you've always been good with money." Not proud. Not relieved. Just confirmed. I worked in operations for a healthcare company. Not glamorous. Not impressive enough to brag about at family gatherings. But I was reliable. I showed up early. Stayed late. Fixed problems before they reached my boss. People trusted me. And I liked that feeling more than I probably should have. That's when the calls from home started changing. Not frequent, just different. "Hey, can I ask you something? Do you think this sounds right? You're good at this stuff." It was small things at first. Help filling out a form. Explaining a bill. Looking over Ethan's resume. I didn't mind. Not really. I'd sit on my couch after work, laptop balanced on my knees, answering questions. The light from the kitchen was always too bright. I never bothered replacing the bulb. It felt familiar. Like being useful meant being close. Ethan dropped out of community college around then. No big announcement. Just a passing mention. "He's figuring things out," my mom said. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah," I said. "That makes sense." Inside, something tightened. I remembered how hard I'd worked to figure things out on my own. But I didn't say anything. I never did. When I was 30, my dad lost his job. That was the first real shift. The tone of the calls changed. Lower. Slower. "I don't want to worry you," he said. Which meant he was already worried. I booked a flight home that weekend. Their house looked the same couch, same framed photos. But the air felt heavier. Like everyone was holding their breath. I sat at the kitchen table while my dad talked. My mom stood at the counter, wiping the same spot over and over. I listened. I asked practical questions. I made notes on my phone. I didn't cry. Later that night, my mom knocked on my bedroom door. "Sweetie," she said softly. Carefully. "You've always been so strong." It wasn't comfort. It was expectation. I helped them make a plan. Budget. Timeline. Options. I drove back to Columbus on Sunday night, hands tight on the steering wheel, jaw clenched the whole way. I remember thinking, this is what family is. Showing up. What I didn't realize yet was how one-sided showing up had become. A year later, Ethan moved back home. Then another year passed. Then another. He tried things. Quit things. Tried again. Every update came with an explanation. Every explanation came with patience. I listened to it all through the phone. Meanwhile, my own life stayed mostly unexamined. No one asked if I was lonely, or tired, or proud of myself. I stopped volunteering information. It felt easier. I met Mark when I was 32. A mutual friend's dinner party. Nothing dramatic. He asked questions. Waited for answers. It surprised me how much that mattered. We moved slowly. Or maybe it just felt slow compared to everything else. When I told my parents about him, my mom said, "Well, that's nice." And then asked if I'd heard from Ethan recently. Mark proposed a year later. I told my parents over FaceTime. My dad smiled. My mom said, "I hope he treats you well." Ethan wasn't on the call. He texted me later, "Congrats." I stared at the message longer than I should have. At the wedding, people kept telling me how calm I seemed. "You're handling this so well," my aunt said. I smiled. I always did. What they didn't see was how practiced that calm was. How automatic. Like my body already knew how to take up as little emotional space as possible, even on a day that was supposed to be about me. After the wedding, life moved forward. I became someone people leaned on even more. The stable one. The responsible one. The one who had it together. And slowly, without anyone saying it out loud, I became something else too. Not the daughter who needed support. Not the sister who needed encouragement. But the one who would always be okay. Whether she was or not. Marriage didn't change me overnight. That's not how it happened. It was smaller than that. Quieter. Mark and I rented a townhouse on the edge of Dublin, Ohio. 2 floors. Beige carpet. A backyard we never really used. It felt like a reasonable place to start a reasonable life. At first, things were fine. We both worked. We both paid bills. We both said, "We'll figure it out a lot." I told myself that meant we were a team. The first time I noticed the imbalance, I didn't name it. Mark would leave his dishes in the sink. I'd wash them before bed. He'd forget to schedule appointments. I'd remind him. Or just do it. If something ran out, I noticed. If something broke, I handled it. Not because he asked. Because it felt easier than explaining. I didn't grow up with the expectation that anyone would step in for me. So when no one did, it didn't feel wrong. It felt familiar. Around that time, Ethan decided he wanted to start fresh. My parents helped him move to Phoenix. They called me from the road. "We just want to give him a chance," my mom said. "He's sensitive." I hummed softly, phone pressed to my ear. "Yeah," I said. "That makes sense." After we hung up, I sat on the couch for a long time. I tried to remember the last time anyone had rearranged their life for me. Nothing came to mind. Mark noticed I was quieter some evenings. "You okay?" he'd ask. I'd nod. "Just tired." Which was true. Just incomplete. The emotional labor crept in slowly. Remembering birthdays. Planning holidays. Keeping track of family dynamics. When Mark's mom needed help after surgery, I coordinated meals. When my parents needed advice, they called me. Somewhere along the way, I became the middle. The connector. The translator. The buffer. No one asked if I wanted that role. They just handed it to me. I turned 35. Mark took me out to dinner. A nice place downtown. White tablecloths. Happy birthday, he said, sliding a small box across the table. Inside was a necklace. I smiled. I really did. But later that night, lying in bed, I realized something that surprised me. It wasn't joy I felt. It was relief. Relief that someone had remembered. My parents called the next day. Sorry we missed yesterday, my mom said. Things have been hectic. I said it was fine. I meant it in the way you mean something after saying it enough times. That same year, Ethan quit another job. This one just wasn't the right fit, my dad explained. They were worried. They were hopeful. They were patient. I listened. I always listened. I never said, I'm tired too. I never said, I'm holding everything together. I didn't even say it to myself. Mark and I talked about kids around then. Soon, he said. Whenever you're ready. I nodded. I told myself I wanted it. But sometimes, late at night, I'd stare at the ceiling and feel something like fear. Not of motherhood. Of disappearing completely. The crack didn't come from a fight. It came from a quiet moment. One evening, I was folding laundry in the living room. The TV was on but muted. Mark was scrolling on his phone. I asked gently, "Can you help me with this?" He looked up, surprised. "Oh. Yeah. I guess." He took a towel. Folded it wrong. Laughed. "You're better at this stuff," he said, handing it back. I took it. I didn't argue. But something inside me shifted. I realized how automatic it was. How expected. How invisible. That night in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection. I looked capable. Put together. Fine. But my shoulders were tight. My jaw hurt. I thought, I'm carrying so much. And for the first time, I wondered. What happens if I stop? Pregnancy didn't feel like a celebration to me. It felt like a decision I'd already made years ago, without realizing it. Mark was happy. My parents were relieved. Everyone kept saying things like, "You'll be such a good mom." I smiled when they said that. I didn't ask what kind of good they meant. Our first son, Noah, was born on a rainy Tuesday morning. The hospital room was cold. Bright. Too quiet between checks. When the nurse placed him on my chest, I felt something real and sharp and grounding. Love, yes. But also responsibility, immediate and heavy. Mark cried. I didn't. I was already counting. Feedings. Sleep. What came next? The first few months blurred together. Nights broken into pieces. Days that never fully started. Mark went back to work quickly. I stayed home longer than planned. It just makes sense, everyone said. I told myself the same thing. I learned Noah's cries before anyone else did. Hungry. Tired. Overstimulated. I learned how to rock him just right. How to keep the house quiet. How to function on fragments of sleep. Mark helped when I asked. But asking felt like another task. So I stopped. My mom called often. "How's my baby?" she'd ask. I knew she meant Noah. I answered anyway. Good. We're good. She told me stories about Ethan. How he was trying again. How he just needed time. I listened while bouncing Noah gently against my shoulder, feeling sweat collect at the base of my neck. Yeah, I said. I hope it works out. When Noah was 2, I went back to work. Daycare drop-offs were harder than I expected. I'd linger by the door while he cried, heart pounding, forcing myself to leave. Mark said, "He'll be fine." I nodded. I didn't tell him that I wasn't. Our second son, Caleb, came 3 years later. By then, I knew how this went. I packed the hospital bag early. Organized meals. Scheduled help that mostly didn't show up. People said, "You've got this." And I did. That was the problem. 2 kids. Full-time job. A house that never stayed clean for long. I became efficient. I could pack lunches while answering emails. Schedule doctor appointments in grocery store parking lots. Remember everyone's preferences without writing them down. I stopped noticing how tired I was. It felt normal. Mark didn't change much. He loved the boys. Played with them. Took them out for ice cream. But the invisible work, the planning, the remembering, the anticipating, stayed with me. If I didn't do it, it didn't happen. If I forgot, it was noticed. One evening, I mentioned feeling overwhelmed. Just once. "I'm kind of exhausted," I said, sitting at the kitchen table. Mark glanced up from his phone. "Yeah," he said. "We're both tired." The conversation ended there. I stared at the table for a moment longer than necessary. Then I stood up and started clearing dishes. At family gatherings, people praised me. "You do so much. I don't know how you manage. You make it look easy." I smiled. Inside, something felt hollow. Like I was being applauded for surviving, not for being seen. My birthdays became quieter. A dinner if I planned it. A cake if I reminded someone. One year, everyone forgot until the next day. "Sorry," Mark said. "Things have been crazy." I said it was okay. I meant it the way I always did, the way that didn't ask for more. At night, after the house finally went still, I'd sit on the edge of the bed and feel my body ache. Lower back. Neck. Shoulders that never fully relaxed. I told myself it was age. Or stress. Or just life. I didn't realize it was burnout. Not yet. The thing about burnout is it doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly. Like dust. Like weight. Like a voice that says, "Just keep going. Everyone's counting on you." And I did. For a long time. By my early 40s, my life looked stable from the outside. 2 kids doing well in school. A steady job. A house that stayed standing. People said things like, "You're so strong. I don't know how you do it." I smiled when they said that. It felt easier than explaining that strength wasn't a choice anymore. It was a requirement. The physical pain started quietly. Lower back first. A dull ache that showed up in the evenings. Then my neck. Then this constant tightness between my shoulders, like I was bracing for something that never arrived. I bought better pillows. Changed chairs. Told myself I needed to stretch more. I didn't say anything to Mark at first. What would I even say? I'm tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. My days ran on autopilot. Wake up before everyone else. Make lunches. Check calendars. Work. Come home. Start again. Mark came home too, later than me most days. He'd drop his keys on the counter. Ask what was for dinner. Not unkindly. Just, automatically. One night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the couch with a heating pad pressed against my back. Mark was watching TV. I shifted slightly, trying to find a position that didn't hurt. "You okay?" he asked, eyes still on the screen. Yeah, I said. My back's been bothering me. He nodded. Getting older, huh? He smiled a little, like it was a joke. I smiled back. The conversation ended there. I started noticing how invisible my exhaustion was. If I kept moving, everything kept working. If I stopped, things piled up immediately. The laundry. The permission slips. The emotional temperature of the house. So I didn't stop.
Ethan called one afternoon. I was in my car, parked outside the grocery store. Hey, he said. Mom said you're good with budgets. I closed my eyes briefly. Yeah, I said. What's going on? He talked. I listened. I always listened. When we hung up, I sat there longer than necessary, staring at the steering wheel. I felt tired in my bones. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just worn down. That year my birthday came and went quietly. No one mentioned it at breakfast. The kids rushed out the door. Mark was already on a call. I noticed around noon. I was folding laundry, standing in the hallway, when it hit me. Not sharply. Softly. Like realizing you forgot something important, and no one else did either. I didn't say anything. Not that day. I made dinner. Helped with homework. Cleaned the kitchen. Mark fell asleep on the couch. I went upstairs alone. The next morning, Mark noticed the calendar notification on his phone. Oh, he said. Was that yesterday? I nodded. I forgot, he said. Sorry. It sounded genuine. It still hurt. Something shifted after that. Not in a dramatic way. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stopped expecting. Which sounds small, but it wasn't. It was like letting go of a rope I'd been holding for years. A week later, my back pain flared so badly I had to sit down halfway through unloading the dishwasher. I rested my hands on the counter, breathing slowly. The house was quiet. For once, no one needed me in that moment. I stood there breathing and thought. I don't even remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to. Not because it was practical. Not because it helped someone else. Just because it might make me feel better. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. The light above hummed softly. I searched for massage chairs. I'd looked before. Closed the tab every time. Too expensive. Not necessary. Selfish. This time, I didn't close it. I thought about my body. About the quiet pain I carried every day. About how small my world had become. 20 minutes, I thought. That's all I want. A place to sit where no one needs anything from me. I ordered it without telling anyone. Not out of spite. Out of exhaustion. When I clicked confirm, my hands shook slightly. I sat back and waited for guilt to arrive. It did. But something else came with it. Relief. When the chair arrived a few days later, it filled the corner of the living room. Big. Noticeable. Mark stared at it. What's this? He asked. My birthday gift, I said quietly. He frowned. That's a lot of money. I nodded. I know. He didn't say happy birthday. He said. You didn't talk to me about this. I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time in years, I didn't rush to explain myself. I needed it, I said. That was all. The fight came later. Words like selfish. Wasteful. Unnecessary. I didn't raise my voice.
I sat there, hands folded, listening. Something inside me felt oddly calm. Like the part of me that needed permission had finally gone quiet. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in the chair. The motors hummed softly. The pressure settled into my back, slow and steady. I closed my eyes. For 20 minutes, I didn't solve anything. I didn't plan anything. I didn't carry anyone. I just existed. And it felt like oxygen. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just said, "I don't think you understand how tired." He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then said, "You should have discussed it with me." I nodded. Maybe. But I've discussed my exhaustion for years. He frowned. You never said it was this bad. I met his eyes. You never asked. The silence that followed was different. Not punishment. Processing. That night, he sat beside me on the couch. Not touching. Not distant. Just there. I didn't realize, he said quietly. I believed that. That didn't make it easier. I don't need grand gestures, I said. I don't need permission. I just need to stop disappearing in my own life. He nodded slowly. I don't want you to disappear, he said. The words sounded sincere. I wanted to believe they'd be enough. A week passed. Then another. The chair became part of the house. No comments. No jabs. Just there. I started taking small pieces of myself back. Reading before bed instead of cleaning. Saying no when I meant no. Sitting down when my body asked me to. The world didn't collapse. One afternoon, my son walked into the living room while I was in the chair. He paused. You okay, Mom? I smiled at him. Yeah, I said. I am. And I meant it. I realized something then. Choosing myself didn't make me louder. It made me clearer. I didn't need to announce it. Didn't need to defend it. I just needed to stop explaining why I mattered. The chair didn't fix my marriage. It didn't erase years of imbalance. But it did something else. It reminded me that I exist, even when no one is watching. Some women break loudly. Some leave. Some scream. I didn't. I stayed. And I stopped shrinking. I used to think strength looked like endurance. Like holding everything together no matter the cost. But I've learned something different. Strength can be quiet. It can look like rest. Like choosing yourself without asking permission. If this story felt familiar, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, you're not alone. So many women live like this and never say it out loud. If you're one of them, take this as your sign. You matter. Your needs matter. And you don't have to disappear to keep the peace. If this story spoke to you, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you want more real, honest stories like this, go ahead and subscribe. Not for drama. Not for noise. But for truth. I'll see you in the next story.